Tawa School whānau, welcome to our Tawa School story time for today. And it's the first day of Alert Level 3, so for those of you who are craving your favourite takeaway, hope you're able to get some of that and enjoy that. Alright, today we are going to be reading The Little Yellow Digger Goes to School. Seeing that we're going back to school, well, soon anyway, I thought this could be a great story, and then we'll continue on with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But first up, The Little Yellow Digger Goes to School. The little yellow digger was coming to our school. The principal had asked it to dig a swimming pool. It clattered through the playground. It came at morning tea. The driver smiled, "Good morning," as we ran around to see. The bell was ringing loudly. We had to go to class. The digger chugged across the field to dig beneath the grass. We crowded round the windows to see what we could see as it began to make a hole where the pool would be. Our principal went out to look. His name was Mr. Lane, but then the digger hit a pipe and burst the water main. A fountain spurted upwards. It was a water spout. Then it cascaded downwards and the driver yelled, "Look out!" Poor Mr. Lane was knocked down flat and soaking wet right through. "Look what you've done," he shouted. "Whatever can we do?" The water went on gushing with a swooshing, swishing sound. It quickly made great puddles on the muddy football ground. Just then another teacher rushed out to lend a hand. He slipped and slithered on the mud. He couldn't even stand. The office phoned the council. "Come quickly as you can." It wasn't very long before they sent a helpful man. He stopped the gushing fountains once the hydrant had been found, but said there'd be no water in the buildings all around. "The bathrooms will be out of use," said worried Mr. Lane. I know. We'll picnic on the beach until they've fixed the main." Just then the council truck arrived. The men unpacked the load, but we'd fetched hats and lunches and were marching down the road. Then while we picnicked on the beach, the digger worked again to help the council workmen repair the broken main. When we returned at 3 o'clock, the water was back on. The digger was still working. The men and truck had gone. Now every time we have a swim in our swimming pool, we remember how the digger had visited our school. The unexpected picnic, a muddy Mr. Lane. We do hope the digger will come to school again. Awesome. Now I'll have a think about whether I do that one as a rap as well. All right, we'd heard about the Oompa Loompas, and now Augustus Gloop goes up the pipe. When Mr. Wonka turned around and saw what Augustus Gloop was doing, he cried out, "Oh no, please, Augustus, please, I beg you not to do that. My chocolate must be untouched by human hands." "Augustus," shouted Mrs. Gloop, "didn't you hear that man? Come away from the river at once." "This stuff is fabulous," said Augustus, taking not the slightest notice of the mother of Mr. Wonka or Mr. Wonka. "Gosh, I need a bucket to drink it properly." "Augustus," cried Mr. Wonka, hopping down and wagging a stick. "You must come away. You are dirtying the chocolate." "Augustus," cried Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus," cried Mr. Gloop. But Augustus was deaf to everything except the call of his enormous stomach. He was now lying full length on the ground, with his head far out over the river, lapping up the chocolate like a dog. "Augustus," shouted Mrs. Gloop, "you will be giving the nasty coat of yours to 1,000,000 people and all over the country." "Be careful, Augustus," shouted Mr. Gloop. "You're leaning out too far." Mr. Gloop was exactly right. For suddenly there was a shriek and then a splash, and into the river went Augustus Gloop. And in 1 second he had disappeared under the brown surface. "Save him!" screamed Mrs. Gloop, going white in the face and waving her umbrella about. "He'll drown! He can't swim a yard! Save him! Save him!" "Good heavens, woman," said Mr. Gloop, "I'm not diving in there. I've got my best suit on." Augustus Gloop's face came up to the surface, painted brown with chocolate. "Help! Help! Help!" he yelled. "Fish me out!" "Don't just stand there," Mrs. Gloop screamed at Mr. Gloop. "Do something!" "I am doing something," said Mr. Gloop, who was now taking off his jacket and getting ready to dive into the chocolate. But while he was doing this, the wretched boy was being sucked closer and closer towards the mouth of one of the great pipes that was dangling down into the river. Then all at once, the powerful suction took hold of him completely, and he was pulled under the surface and then into the mouth of the pipe. The crowd on the riverbank waited breathlessly to see where he would come out. "There he goes!" somebody shouted, pointing upwards. And sure enough, because the pipe was made of glass, Augustus Gloop could be seen clearly shooting up inside headfirst like a torpedo. "Help! Murder! Police!" screamed Mrs. Gloop. "Augustus, come back at once!" "Where are you going?" "It's a wonder to me," said Mr. Gloop. "How is the pipe big enough for him to go through it?" "It isn't big enough," said Charlie Bucket. "Oh dear, look, he's slowing down." "I saw he is," said Grandpa Joe. "He's going to stick." "I think he is," said Grandpa Joe. "By golly, he has stuck," said Charlie. "It's his stomach that's done it," said Mr. Gloop. "Oh, he's blocked the old pipe," said Grandpa Joe. "Smash the pipe!" yelled Mrs. Gloop, still waving her umbrella. "Augustus, come out of there at once!" The watchers below could see the chocolate swishing around the boy in the pipe, and they could see it building up him in a solid mass, pushing against the blockage. The pressure was terrific. Something had to give, and something did give, and that something was Augustus. Whoomph! Up he shot again like a bullet Up he shot again like a bullet in the barrel of a gun. "He's disappeared!" yelled Mrs. Gloop. "Where does the pipe go? Quick, call the fire brigade!" "Keep calm," cried Mr. Wonka. "Keep calm, my dear lady, keep calm. There is no danger whatsoever. Augustus has gone on a little journey, that's all, a most interesting little journey, but he'll come out of it just fine. You wait and see." "How can he possibly come out just fine?" snapped Mrs. Gloop. "He'll be made into marshmallows in 5 seconds." "Impossible!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Unthinkable, inconceivable, absurd. He could never be made into marshmallows." "And why not, may I ask?" shouted Mrs. Gloop. "Because the pipe doesn't go anywhere near it. That pipe, the one Augustus went up, happens to lead directly to the room where I make a most delicious kind of strawberry-flavoured chocolate-coated fudge." "Then he'll be made into strawberry-flavoured chocolate-coated fudge," screamed Mrs. Gloop. "My poor Augustus! They'll be selling him by the pound all over the country tomorrow morning." "Quite right," said Mr. Gloop. "I know I'm right," said Mrs. Gloop. "It's beyond a joke," said Mr. Gloop. "Mr. Wonka doesn't seem to think so," cried Mr. Gloop. "Just look at him, he's laughing his head off. How dare you laugh like that when my boy's just gone up the pipe? You monster!" she shrieked, pointing her umbrella at Mr. Wonka, as though she was going to run him through. "You think it's a joke, do you? You think that sucking up my boy into your fudge room like that is one great big joke?" "He'll be perfectly safe," said Mr. Wonka, giggling slightly. "He'll be chocolate fudge!" cried Mrs. Gloop. "Never!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Of course he will!" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "I would not allow it!" cried Mr. Wonka. "And why not?" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Because the taste would be terrible," said Mr. Wonka. "Just imagine it, Augustus-flavoured candy-coated gloop. No one would buy it." "They most certainly would!" cried Mrs. Gloop indignantly. "I don't want to think about it!" shrieked Mrs. Gloop. "Nor do I," said Mr. Wonka. "And I do promise you, madam, that your darling boy is perfectly safe." "If he is perfectly safe, then where is he?" snapped Mrs. Gloop. "Lead me to him this instant." Mr. Wonka turned around and clicked his fingers sharply 3 times. Immediately, an Oompa Loompa appeared as if from nowhere and stood beside him. The Oompa Loompa bowed and smiled, showing beautiful white teeth. His skin was rosy white, his long hair was golden brown, and the top of his head came just above the height of Mr. Wonka's knee. He wore the usual deerskin slung over his shoulder. "Now listen to me," said Mr. Wonka, looking down at the tiny man. "I want you to take Mr. and Mrs. Gloop up to the fudge room and help them to find their son Augustus. He's just gone up the pipe." The Oompa Loompa took one laugh at Mrs. Gloop and exploded into peals of laughter. "Oh, do be quiet," said Mr. Wonka. "Control yourself. Pull yourself together. Mrs. Gloop doesn't think it's all funny." "You can say that again," said Mrs. Gloop. "Go straight to the fudge room," Mr. Wonka said to the Oompa Loompa, "and when you get there, take a long stick and start poking around inside the big chocolate mixing barrel. I'm almost certain you'll find him in there. But you'll better be sharp. You'll have to hurry. If you leave him in the chocolate mixing barrel too long, he's liable to be poured out into the fudge boiler, and that really would be a disaster, wouldn't it? My fudge would be quite unedible. Mrs. Gloop let out a shriek of fury. Oh, I'm joking, said Mr. Wonka, giggling madly behind his beard. I didn't mean it. Forgive me. I'm so sorry. Goodbye, Mrs. Gloop. Goodbye, Mr. Gloop. Goodbye. I'll see you later. As Mr. and Mrs. Gloop and their tiny escort hurried away, the 5 Oompa Loompas on the far side of the river suddenly began hopping and dancing about and beating wildly upon a number of very small drums. Augustus Gloop, they chanted. Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop. Grandpa, cried Charlie. Listen to them, Grandpa. What are they doing? Shh, whispered Grandpa. I think they're going to sing us a song. Augustus Gloop, Augustus Gloop, chanted the Oompa Loompas, the great big greedy nincompoop. How long could we allow this beast to gorge and guzzle, feed and feast on everything he wanted to? Great Scott, it simply wouldn't do. However long this pig might live, we're positive he'd never give even the smallest bit of fun or happiness to anyone. So what we do in cases such as this, we use the gentle touch, and carefully we take the brat and turn him into something that will give great pleasure to us all. A doll, for instance, or a ball, or marbles, or a rocking horse. But this revolting boy, of course, was so unutterably vile, so greedy, foul, and infantile. He left a most disgusting taste inside our mouths, and so in haste we chose a thing that, come what may, would take the nasty taste away. Come on, we cried, the time is ripe to send him shooting up the pipe. He has to go, it has to be, and very soon he's going to see, inside the room to which he's gone, some funny things are going on. But don't, dear children, be alarmed. Augustus Gloop will not be harmed, although, of course, we must admit he will be altered quite a bit. He'll be quite changed from what he's been, and what he goes through the fudge machine. Slowly the wheels go round and round, the cogs begin to grind and pound, 100 knives go slice, slice, slice. We add some sugar, cream, and spice. We boil 'em for a minute more until we're absolutely sure. Then all the greed and all the gall is boiled away for once and all. From out he comes, and now by grace a miracle has taken place. This boy, who only just before was loathed by man from shore to shore, the greedy brute, this louse's ear, is loved by people everywhere, for who could hate or bear a grudge against a luscious bit of fudge? I told you they love singing, cried Mr. Wonka. Aren't they delightful? Aren't they charming? But you mustn't believe a word they say. It's all nonsense, every little bit of it. Are the Oompa Loompas really joking, Grandpa? Asked Charlie. Of course they're joking, answered Grandpa Joe. They must be joking at least. I hope they're joking. Don't you? Well, that's all for today. The next chapter is called Down the Chocolate River. It's another beautiful day here, so enjoy getting outside. Remember to keep your distance, but enjoy being able to hang out with more members of your family. If you extend your bubble, look after yourselves, and we'll catch you for Tawa School Story Time again tomorrow. Ka kite anō.